issue that requires global efforts. The Coalition continues to dedicate itself to sharing information on violations of fundamental human rights on the Internet and other connecting technologies, to cooperate in finding means to protect human rights online, and to support, both politically and through project support, the ability of individuals to exercise their human rights online, including in the OSCE area. After the Coalition's constituent multi-stakeholder conference in The Hague in December of 2011, Coalition member Kenya organized a successful event on Internet freedom in Africa in September 2012 in Nairobi, which highlighted opportunities for economic development presented by increased connectivity. Tunisia will host a third Freedom Online conference in Tunis from 16 to 18 June 2013 to provide a multi-stakeholder platform to discuss issues of Internet freedom in the Middle East and North Africa. We engage with other governments, regional organizations, international institutions, civil society and other relevant stakeholders such as businesses and academics to reinforce our efforts in this regard. The Freedom Online Coalition wishes to express its sincere gratitude to the representative on freedom of the media, Mrs. Dunja Mijatovic, and her team for having organized an OSCE conference which deals with the important topic of Internet freedom. This event has provided an open platform for all relevant stakeholders to engage in meaningful debate about human rights and digital media in the OSCE region. At the same time, the Freedom Online Coalition notes with concern the continued harassment, intimidation and killings of journalists, civil society members and other professionals working online, as well as illicit monitoring, filtering and hacking, and urges all participating states to fully implement our common commitments on freedom of expression and freedom of the media. We are no less concerned by the attempts to arbitrarily block or control Internet content. Limiting access to information, as well as to the free flow of information, beyond the few exceptional circumstances in which restrictions are acceptable in accordance with international human rights legal obligation, is unacceptable. The members of the Freedom Online Coalition deeply regret that for the second consecutive year, the OSCE was unable to adopt any decision at the 2012 Dublin Ministerial Council meeting on human dimension priorities, including strengthening media freedom. We also see the need for participating states to recognize the applicability of fundamental human rights on the Internet. To that end, the Freedom Online Coalition members reiterate their support for the draft declaration on fundamental freedoms in the digital age. Within our OSCE context, we will continue to develop, promote and support new initiatives in the field of freedom online. And we will continue supporting already existing efforts that can fortunately count on the support of many more participating states in this room. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank for this statement and pass the floor to the distinguished representative of the United States of America. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I commend also the representative for freedom of the media for convening this conference and note that the OSCE has a long tradition of promoting and defending human rights and fundamental freedoms everywhere. These human rights and fundamental freedoms include the freedoms that we exercise online. The United States champions Internet freedom because it recognizes the applicability online of long-standing, universal, and cherished rights, the fundamental freedoms of expression, peaceful assembly and association, as well as the freedom of religion or belief. An open internet gives people a neutral space in which to know and act upon their rights and help to shape the future of their communities, their countries, and their world. Men and women in every country deserve to be able to take part in building a more peaceful, prosperous, and free international community. In the 21st century, technology is an empowering platform that ordinary citizens can use to exercise and demand respect for their rights, in turn ensuring that the internet itself remains a free medium and helps to create the space for people to use this technology to pursue their aspirations for dignity and freedom. As former Secretary Clinton emphasized, the rights of individuals, and this was 2 years ago to the day today, the rights of individuals to express their views freely, petition their leaders, worship according to their beliefs, these rights are universal whether they are exercised in a public square or on an individual blog. The freedoms to assemble and associate also apply in cyberspace. In our time, people are as likely to come together to pursue common interests online as in a church or a labor hall. As we all know, the internet and other new technologies are having a profound effect on the ability of citizens across the globe to become informed about their societies and the world, to form networks and organize civic movements. And because repressive regimes understand the power of this technology to empower their citizens, they are redoubling their efforts to control it. It is no coincidence that authorities who try to restrict the exercise of human rights and fundamental freedoms by their people, who impede the work of human rights defenders and civil society organizations, who control the press and obstruct the flow of information, tend to be the same authorities who restrict, impede, control, and obstruct their citizens' peaceful use of these new connective technologies. And incidentally, the same ones who appear too afraid to join in reaffirming the applicability of timeless principles in this digital age. By now, governments understand that both they and their citizens can harness the power of new technologies, which can act as accelerants or inhibitors of innovation and political, social, and economic change. Many governments have embraced these new technologies as a way to connect with and serve their citizens, and they are reaping common benefits. Other governments welcome these technologies only selectively. With one hand, they endeavor to use them in a restricted fashion as tools of innovation, commerce, and scientific advancement. With the other, they wield them as tools of repression. When internet freedom is challenged, a range of human rights and fundamental freedoms are often at stake, not solely freedom of expression. Indeed, the interconnections among fundamental freedoms become more apparent as new technologies converge. For example, unlike traditional media, social media are capable of facilitating actual and virtual conversations, associations, and assemblies in real time. Today, governments within the OSCE are filtering and censoring content, creating blacklists of forbidden internet sites, taking down sites, posting content with which they disagree, targeting independent sites with distributed denial of service attacks, perpetrating localized shutdowns of internet and SMS messaging capabilities, trying to create so-called national internets, national barriers in cyberspace that would prevent citizens from accessing the global internet. They're using terms like, quote, information security and internet management to justify repression. They are persecuting bloggers who criticize their governments, targeting social media and stealing information about their own people in order to target them for persecution. States cannot wall off the internet, at least not for long, and not without detriment to the very characteristics that make the internet an enabler of creativity and success. So too, as Europe's recent past teaches us, you cannot wall off freedom, not by slabs of concrete and not by blocking online content. We must push back against internet repression and make a principled stand for openness and safe access to the internet, even as we work together and grapple with age-old challenges on the new digital terrain. We commend our partners in the EU and applaud the efforts of the recent Lithuanian and Irish chairmanships for making freedom of the media and safety of journalists online and offline priorities. And we urge that these compelling concerns remain priorities under the Ukrainian chairmanship and chairmanships to follow. As part of our global effort to counter online repression, the United States has joined like-minded democracies in launching a Digital Defenders Partnership, an unprecedented collaboration among governments to provide support for digital activists under threat. The Digital Defenders Partnership aims to keep the internet open and free from emerging threats, specifically in repressive and transitional environments. As an initial investment, the Netherlands, the United States, the United Kingdom, and the government of Estonia have dedicated over 2.5 million euros to the DDP. The United States fully recognizes that the internet is being used by malevolent actors and irresponsible actors in the conduct of terrorist activities and other crimes, as well as to foment violent extremism, to propagate anti-Semitism and other forms of intolerance, and to purvey child pornography. We condemn and are determined to combat all of these appalling endeavors online and offline. Some argue that extensive government controls of the internet are necessary to be effective against these vile phenomena, but it is impossible to keep people safe in a way that preserves their rights. The responsibility to thwart terrorism and crime and act against hatred in all of its ugly forms should not be used by governments as a justification for restricting the exercise of fundamental freedoms online and offline. We will continue to resist the efforts of some governments to rationalize their repression through the guise of regulations to control these real-world dangers. The internet is home to every kind of speech: false, truthful, offensive, beautiful, incendiary, uplifting, trite, and transformative. What we say, post, and tweet has consequences. Hateful words can inflame hostilities and deepen divisions. New connection technologies can amplify intolerant speech, and once it is out on the web, it is impossible to retract. At the same time, the internet also provides a space for people to debate and bridge their differences and build understanding. The way to combat hate speech online or off is not to criminalize it, but to contest it. Governments in particular should lead by example. We should protect the exercise of freedom of human rights and fundamental freedoms online and off with the force of law, reject the propagators of hate with the force of conscience, and project our voices online and off in defense of human dignity, confident that, in the long run, the force of reason will win out over hate. Governments that respect their citizens have no reason to fear when citizens exercise their rights, and governments that respect the rights of their citizens have no reason to fear a free internet. As President Obama has said, suppressing ideas never succeeds in making them go away. But just as we support individuals who are targeted every day for exercising their rights online, we are conscious of a broader threat to the future of internet openness. Right now, in various international forums, including the OSCE, some countries are working to change how the internet is governed. They want to replace the current multi-stakeholder approach, which supports the free flow of information in a global network and includes governments, the private sector, and citizens. In its place, they aim to impose a system that expands control over internet resources, institutions, and content, and centralizes that control in the hands of governments. These debates will play out in international forums over the next few months and years. The United States supports preserving and deepening the current multi-stakeholder approach because it brings together the best of governments, the private sector, and civil society to manage the network, and it works. The multi-stakeholder system has kept the internet up and running for years all over the world. We want the next generation of internet users, whether individual citizens, small business owners, or independent journalists, to be involved in shaping the future of the platform. We also welcome contributions that would strengthen international efforts to secure internet freedom. The distinguished Dutch representative has already spoken about the Freedom Online Coalition, of which we are proud to be a part. What we do now to ensure a global, open, and free internet and the rights of those who use it will have a profound effect on how billions of men and women on the planet exercise their human rights and fundamental freedoms for decades to come. Of course, the work of building democracy and protecting human rights is never done. And one of the strengths of the OSCE has been that it provides a forum for discussing this challenge and making progress together. To date, 48 OSCE participating states, including the United States, have co-sponsored the draft Declaration on Fundamental Freedoms in the Digital Age. We urge those that have not yet done so to do the same and to join the growing global consensus that human rights and fundamental freedoms do not change with new technologies, and to reaffirm that all countries have the obligation to respect and ensure the free exercise of these rights and freedoms online and off. Again, we champion internet freedom because we champion human rights and fundamental freedoms. Human rights and fundamental freedoms inhere in people, not in technologies. The internet is not just a new venue for their exercise. We do not need a new set of international treaties or rules governing the exercise of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the online space. We have them already. They are embodied in international law and enshrined in the Helsinki Final Act and other OSCE documents. Thank you very much.
I thank you, sir, for this statement, and call on the next speaker on my list, the distinguished representative of France. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. France fully supports the statement of the European Union, as well as the statement made on behalf of the Freedom of Online Coalition. I would first like to thank for the organization of this multi-stakeholder conference, the OSCE representative on freedom of the media, Ms. Donia Mijatovic, whose action, alongside that of the United Nations Special Rapporteur on freedom of opinion and expression, is decisive in promoting and protecting freedom of expression and of the media. The Internet is a powerful tool for disseminating ideas and hence for the exercise of a free and open democracy. By giving individuals broad access to information and communication, the Internet helps public opinion and civil society assert themselves in many countries. While a third of the humanity, including almost 820 million people in OSCE member states, is now connected to the Internet, we are witnessing, with the development of the Internet, a worrying increase in restrictions to freedom of expression over and via the Internet when it is diverted from its purpose, to serve as a tool of repression. Alleging reasons of national security and even prohibition to blasphemy or indulge in defamation, the more restrictive regimes make sure that the voices of dissidents are silenced and calls for reform stifled. Bloggers, net citizens, defenders of human rights, as well as journalists, are now targeted. Arbitrary censorship measures, general restrictions to Internet access, and attempted excessive criminalization of certain forms of expression on the Internet go against the international commitments of states. France strongly condemns all censorship and arbitrary and general access restrictions, and in this respect supports action by the representative on freedom of the media, who exercises a key warning role in terms of these violations in OSCE countries. Mr. Chairman, certain threats stemming from the possibilities offered by the Internet are real and may justify limited, transparent, and predictable state measures in accordance with human rights international law and our OSCE commitments. Yet, freedom of expression and information, irrespective of borders, is the primary requirement at the core of all freedoms in any democratic society. We are therefore striving to promote freedom of opinion, expression, information, assembly, and association on the Internet, with due regard for others' fundamental rights. The aim is to pursue our efforts in a multi-stakeholders framework in support of an open Internet to ensure that these fundamental rights enjoy the same protections and guarantees in cyberspace as in the real world. Mr. Chairman, we are convinced that freedom of expression and security, exchange of information and respect for confidentiality of personal data, and the exercise of individual rights and collective responsibility can be achieved simultaneously. This is a tricky, evolving balance that needs to be clearly defined at times, and we are here to reflect on this together. We highly appreciate the choice of the OSCE representative on freedom of the media to include all stakeholders during these 2 days, representatives of government, media, civil society, academia, whose role is crucial to find this right balance. Our reflection shall remain based on human rights as our primary commitment and future line of action. Thank you.
I thank you for this statement and pass the floor to the distinguished representative of Kazakhstan. You may have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. The delegation of Kazakhstan has the honor to congratulate the office of Dunya Miatovich and her team for an excellent arrangement of this conference with almost 400 participants, the biggest ever we recollect since several years ago. We also commend the Dunya Miatovich's office for inviting excellent speakers whose insights we hope will help in shaping policies to advance media freedom in the OSCE area. The delegation of Kazakhstan is really delighted to be here at this important conference. Already been given a great deal to reflect on by the contributions and discussions we have heard. We don't for a moment believe in Kazakhstan that we have all answers about the digital space or what we have got everything right. We recognize there is more to do to get the correct balance right between harnessing the Internet's extraordinary potential to drive prosperity and social and individual development, and the need to protect the safety of our citizens and stability of our society. These threats are, of course, a problem for all countries. But it is particularly real for Kazakhstan, which is located in an unstable region where sadly violent extremism has got a foothold in neighboring countries, and a special danger for a nation like ours, which has taken the deliberate decision to create an open society. But our strong growth has been matched by an equally impressive rise in internet use. Over 40% of our citizens are now web users, and almost threefold increase since 2008. The number of domain names registered in our country is rising by 25% per year. It is not, of course, as good as many developed countries with their near universal access to it, but it is good both for our region and the relative development of Kazakhstan. As a government, we understand the importance of spreading these opportunities as widely as possible. We are investing significantly to provide the infrastructure needed to tackle the digital divide and allow the power of the web to be harnessed by all our regions and all our citizens. This includes reducing costs and maximizing coverage so that the internet can be accessed from mobile phones. There is a concerted drive to move as much of government online as possible for citizens to reduce costs, cut delays, and limit the opportunities for corruption. We are keen to provide as much content as possible in the Kazakh, Russian, and English languages. And of course, our young people, like their generation across the world, have adopted social media as their own. Even some Kazakh politicians have turned to Twitter to get their messages across to wider audiences. All of this explains why Kazakhstan was ranked the country with the most improved performance in the global index of the World Web Foundation. We were placed 28th out of 61 in the index, which measured the impact of the web around the world. But we are determined to do better still. We also know that the WWF criticizes us for what it calls periodic censorship of the web within the country. It is a criticism echoed, I know, in other fora. We want to move as quickly as possible to a position where expression is free unless it directly threatens the stability of our society. After all, freedom of expression is guaranteed under our constitution. In recent years, we have seen moves to bring Kazakhstan in line with other countries. We have, for example, moved to make defamation a civil rather than a criminal offense and prevent organizations claiming penal costs for damage to their reputations. We also understand we have to go further, and we will, with the help of our partners, will do so. The internet is providing extraordinary opportunities for economic, social, and personal development, and we are determined that our country and people will benefit from them. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, sir, for the statement. I now invite to the floor the distinguished representative of Azerbaijan. You may have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The issue of internet, social networks, and media freedom, as well as the issue of rights and responsibilities in the framework of the freedom of expression and freedom of speech, are the core highlights of this conference. The sensitive moment, though, in this regard is the thesis being pushed within the OSCE recently on the possibility of using social networks to influence internal political situation. It should be mentioned that there are different approaches within the OSCE to this particular issue, and there are no relevant political commitments which on the one hand would determine the level of commitments of these social network users, and on the other hand would give them certain rights. Though I would like to stress that OSCE participating states have concrete commitments of non-interference in the internal affairs of other states and respect for national sovereignty and territorial integrity of the member states. In this regard, we consider that working sessions of this event, as well as the composition of the panelists, should reflect existing different approaches in the relevant sphere. Due to that, we suppose that involvement of the representatives of the state agencies dealing with unjustified attempts to use the social networks to destabilize the situation and to breach public order could give a chance for those representatives to tell the member states and the participants of this conference about the difficulties they are facing while addressing attempts to hold unauthorized rallies and demonstrations. One of the important moments which should not be left unnoticed is the consequences of unauthorized demonstrations. It should be appropriate to take into account the damages to the state and private property caused by the unauthorized rallies and demonstrations, as well as to reveal the external powers interested in such attempts to destabilize public order. In this context, it's worth mentioning that international covenants on civil and political rights, as well as OSCE document Copenhagen 1990 and other relevant international human rights treaties, clearly indicates the possibility of restriction to the right of peaceful assembly and freedom of expression in conformity with the law and which is necessary in the interest of national security or public safety, public order, the protection of public health or morals, or the protection of the rights and freedoms of others. Having said that, we would like to reiterate the importance of the comprehensive approach to the issue of the rights and commitments of all participants of this process, users of the social networks initiating the public disorder, participants of such unauthorized demonstrations, and also state agencies responsible for addressing violations of the right to public and private property. We encourage organizers of the conference and OSCE chairmanship to take note of this remark in the context of future discussions on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I call on the next speaker, the distinguished representative of Switzerland. You may have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. We would like to thank the Office of the Representative on Freedom of the Media for having organized this conference with excellent panelists and for allocating sufficient time for discussions. This conference is timely and continues the discussion on freedom of expression and freedom of the media on the internet, which OSCE participating states have pursued for the past years. In the past decade, the internet has developed into a space that is critical for people to exercise their human rights and fundamental freedoms, in particular, the rights to freedom of expression, freedom of assembly and association. Apart from its positive effects, the rapidly growing activities on the internet have also brought negative effects on the enforceability of national laws and have challenged international norms originally established for the offline world. While it is true that we face a number of complex issues and dilemmas when we try to conceptualize digital media freedom, we can build on a solid basis of international human rights law and on equality solid OSCE commitments. Governments must secure their citizens' enjoyment of a maximum of rights and services while limiting restrictions to the minimum necessary. There should be no difference in people's rights and fundamental freedoms between the online and the offline world. The same rules and principles based on the rule of law must be applied. The question of rights and responsibilities related to the freedom of expression has divided OSCE participating states in the discussion conducted until today. It is true that the exercise of freedom of expression and information carries with it duties and responsibilities which may be subject to formalities, conditions, or restrictions. Any regulation for online as well as for offline media, however, should first and foremost protect and respect media freedom, and any restrictions thereto should respect the provisions of Article 10, Para 2 of the European Convention of Human Rights and of Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. In its recommendations on a new notion of media of 2011, the Council of Europe proposes a gradual and differentiated approach to media regulation depending on the function of a particular media service in a democratic society, with a view to maximize media freedom and minimize restrictions. Following this path, the limits of the right to freedom of information and expression should not be defined by arbitrary decision of governments, but by the people themselves in a democratic process. We have spoken a lot about blocking and filtering in the past 2 days, in particular with regard to protecting children from hateful and illegal content. The voluntary and responsible use of internet filters can promote confidence and security on the internet for users, but it impacts on the right to freedom of expression and information. The decision whether to use filtering and blocking measures should not be in the hands of governments or private service providers. The users themselves, parents or educators should decide to adopt such measures. Non-governmental actors have played a key role in the development of the internet, online services and applications. They have brought innovation and opportunities to citizens, users and businesses. A multi-stakeholder approach, therefore, appears to be the right way to develop and implement internet governance. Many participants to this conference recommended a close dialogue and cooperation between government enterprises and civil society. In the same vein, the discussion on elaborating globally shared principles would have to include all stakeholders on a voluntary basis. Concluding, we call on the participating states to continue the discussion on internet freedom and to work closely with other international organizations active in the field, with the aim to contribute to a relevant policy development to advance media freedom. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you. I now call on the distinguished representative of Turkey. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. In my brief remarks, I would like to join the previous speakers in expressing our gratitude to the representative on freedom of the media, Ms. Dunja Mijatović, and her able team for organizing the Internet 2013 conference. Thanks to their dedicated efforts, this important event, which has brought together stakeholders including from civil society, media, academia, the private sector, can be considered a great success. Although spanning only 1.5 days, the conference boasted a diverse selection of sessions which addressed a great variety of salient and relevant issues. Turkey fully upholds the principles of freedom of the media as well as freedom of expression, which are safeguarded by our constitution, other relevant legislation, and international conventions to which we are a party. As a token of our stance, we are among the co-sponsors of the draft declaration on fundamental freedoms in digital age, which we hope will find even broader support among the OSCE participating states this year. The Internet, which has had an incalculable impact on our daily lives within the space of only a few decades, is now an indispensable tool for many people worldwide. The leap forward in the dissemination of ideas which the Internet has provided has been compared to the invention of the printed press. Needless to say, this major technological innovation also brings with it valuable opportunities to advance media freedom. On the other hand, in order to have an exhaustive appraisal of the Internet, we also need to take up the many challenges that are related with the use of this outstanding medium of exchange. Otherwise, we would be missing an important side of the coin. This question has been touched upon in several segments of the conference. Nevertheless, we believe our dialogue should continue, and we count on the efforts of the representative on the freedom of the media to guide us into more focused discussions in this challenging aspect of the question as well, without certainly aiming at restricting fundamental rights and freedoms. We appreciate that this conference has provided a broad participatory venue for discussing these important issues, and we look forward to the future work in this direction that would yield concrete results. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Ambassador, for this statement. And now call on the distinguished representative of the Holy See. Monsignor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. And the Holy See also wishes to express its gratitude to the OSCE representative on freedom of the media for organizing this important and timely conference dedicated to Internet 2013, Shaping Policies to Advance Media Freedom. What has emerged clearly from our discussions over the past day and a half is that today's revolution in social communications involves a fundamental reshaping of the elements by which people comprehend the world about them and verify and express what they have comprehended. The constant availability of images and ideas and their rapid transmission, even from continent to continent, have profound consequences, both positive and negative, for the psychological, moral, and social development of persons, the structure and functioning of societies, intercultural communications, and the perception and transmission of values, worldviews, ideologies, and even religious beliefs. The spread of the Internet also raises a number of other ethical questions about matters like privacy, the security and confidentiality of data, copyright and intellectual property law, pornography, hate sites, the dissemination of rumor and character assassination under the guise of news, and much else. Already the Internet has been used in aggressive ways, almost as a weapon of war, and people speak of the danger of cyber terrorism. It would be painfully ironic if this instrument of communication, with so much potential for bringing people together, became an arena of international conflict. A number of concerns about the Internet are implicit in what has been said. One of the most important of these involves what today is called the digital divide, a form of discrimination dividing the rich from the poor, both within and among nations, on the basis of access or lack of access to the new information technology. The expression digital divide underlines the fact that individuals, groups, and nations must have access to the new technologies in order to share in the promised benefits of globalization and development and not fall further behind. Cyberspace ought to be a resource of comprehensive information and services available without charge to all and in a wide range of languages. Public institutions have a particular responsibility to establish and maintain sites of this kind. The question of freedom of expression on the Internet is similarly complex and gives rise to another set of concerns. The Holy See strongly supports freedom of expression and the free exchange of ideas. Freedom to seek and know the truth is a fundamental human right. And we deplore attempts by public authorities to block access to information on the Internet or in any other media of social communication because they find it threatening or embarrassing to them to manipulate the public by propaganda and disinformation. Authoritarian regimes are by far the worst offenders in this regard, but the problem also exists in liberal democracies, where access to media for political expression often depends on wealth, and politicians and their advisors violate truthfulness and fairness by misrepresenting opponents and shrinking issues to soundbite dimensions. Among the specific problems presented by the Internet is the presence of hate sites devoted to defaming and attacking religious and ethnic groups. Some of these target the Catholic Church, Christian faith, and morality. Like pornography and violence in the media, Internet hate sites are reflections of the dark side of human nature. And while respect for free expression may require tolerating even voices of hatred up to a point, industry self-regulation, and where required, intervention by public authority, should establish and enforce reasonable limits to what can be said. Criminal behavior in other contexts is criminal behavior in cyberspace, and the civil authorities have a duty and a right to enforce such laws. New regulations also may be needed to deal with special internet crimes, like the dissemination of computer viruses, the theft of personal data stored on hard disks, and the like. Regulation of the internet is desirable, and in principle, industry regulation is best. For the Holy See, the solution to problems arising from unregulated commercialization and privatization does not lie in state control of media, but in more regulation according to the criteria of public service and in greater public accountability. Industry codes of ethics can play a useful role, provided they are seriously intended, involve representatives of the public, including from religious communities, in their formulation and enforcement, and, along with giving encouragement to responsible communicators, carry appropriate penalties for violations. The Internet's transnational, boundary-bridging character and its role in globalization require international cooperation in setting standards and establishing mechanisms to promote and protect the international common good. The Internet can make an enormously valuable contribution to human life. It can foster prosperity and peace, intellectual and aesthetic growth, mutual understanding among peoples and nations on a global scale. My delegation will certainly work in this sense. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank you for your statement and pass the floor to the distinguished representative of Hungary. You may have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, we would like to express our gratitude to OSCE and especially to Dunja Mijatović for organizing this conference. We believe that it's been a great opportunity for us to share our views, to present the true natures of our freedom of press and freedom of media in our countries. I would like to express our full support as well to the statement of the European Union with which we completely aligned. Please allow me a somewhat unique perspective as a deputy spokesperson of my government and as a former blogger and active member of online communities by focusing on the Hungarian online news media and blogosphere and its unique path of development and its unique current state. This unique development of news media in Hungary roots back to the early days of the internet, when all the major players of the Hungarian online media sphere were born. They were born as startups and not as an online version of old media enterprises and news products. And probably this is the reason why they could keep their independence and why they could keep their autonomy, and as such they practice a very critical action in the Hungarian news realm, and they probably illustrate the most the reality of Hungarian freedom of press and the plurality of the Hungarian media. They are very critical, they are very sarcastic, they are very ironic, and to be perfectly honest, as someone who is responsible for the communications of the government, I can tell you that they cause a lot of problem to us. But this is, I guess, the role of any press player or any media player in the world. But they don't just cause problem to us, but they cause problem to any actors of the public sphere in Hungary. Talking about the regulation question, they have all the content providers in Hungary a very healthy self-regulatory system. Their self-regulation is very much limited, but limited to those issues and those types of contents which were addressed during this conference as truly dangerous and unwelcome types of contents. And this self-regulatory system of the Hungarian content providers is very effective and very successful, and probably this is the reason why there is no need for the Hungarian authorities to interfere into this sphere, and this is the reality. There has never been any case of this interference by the authorities to the online news content provider sphere. Probably these factors and other factors as well were the reasons why in a recent study of the Freedom House published in October last year, on a global survey, Hungary ranked number 5 on global scale in terms of freedom of internet. Only 4 countries were ahead of us, including Estonia, United States, Germany, and Australia, and there we were 5th in this rank. I guess this shows exactly how free and unlimited the internet can be, but still some of the regulatory problems could be very well addressed by a powerful, effective, and successful self-regulatory system among them. And I guess this is why we can show a kind of happiness about this sphere in Hungary, and this is the illustration, probably the best illustration of media plurality and freedom of press in Hungary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for this statement, and now pass the floor to the distinguished representative of Sweden. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, dear Eor, I align myself fully with the statement made by the European Union as well as the statement made by the Netherlands on behalf of the Freedom Online Coalition. And I'd like to make some additional comments in national capacity. Let me start by joining previous speakers in expressing my sincere gratitude to the representative of the Freedom of the Media, Mrs. Dunja Mijatovic, and her fantastic team for organizing this timely event. Over the past couple of days, we've been able to touch upon some of the aspects that rapid advancement of technology has brought in terms of freedom of expression and its corollary media freedom. Throughout various sessions, the need for protecting human rights within new technologies by means of applying our common OSCE commitments and existing international human rights law online as well as offline has been highlighted. As we've seen, the internet is not only a catalyst for innovation, but a vital component in safeguarding our democratic values and the new frontline for the work for freedom in the world. Internet freedom is a cornerstone in Swedish foreign policy. It is with deep concern, therefore, that we observe how some participating states continue to impose or even strengthen restrictions on the use of new technologies in order to control, monitor, or even harass individuals who express their opinions through new media. Such curbing of fundamental freedoms, whether it be online or offline, is inconsistent with international human rights law as well as our common media freedom commitments. Let me reiterate in this context that the exercise of freedom of expression and media freedom online does not imply that limitations to these freedoms may never be imposed. On the contrary, restrictions to fundamental freedoms online may indeed apply, for example, with regard to hate speech or incitement to violence. Such restrictions must nevertheless be considered the exception, and when allowed, they must strictly follow the requirements set out in established international human rights law. Thus, as concluded during our sessions, for instance on hateful speech, the good news is that we don't need any new rules, regulations, or standards, as the international human rights commitments that are already in place are sufficient in this regard. Rather, the application of human rights online as well as offline is a prerequisite for creating the best possible conditions for an open and free internet through which individuals, media outlets, governments, journalists, NGOs, and many others communicate, impart, and receive information freely. Furthermore, throughout the various discussions these days, we have seen that the pressing need is not to strike a balance between security on the one hand and internet freedom on the other. Rather, Discussions on cybersecurity should not be held in isolation, as freedom and security are mutually reinforcing rather than conflicting. After all, the purpose of security is to protect open and free societies and our fundamental rights. Hence, cybersecurity must never limit the same human rights that it in fact exists to protect. And allow me to welcome in this context the establishment of the OSCE cross-dimensional working group on cybersecurity, enabling for a comprehensive security-related dialogue for the development of CBMs. Taking full use of all three of the OSCE's dimensions is necessary to tackle this issue that truly is cross-cutting and horizontal. To further strengthen the dialogue on internet freedom and its relation to security and development, Sweden has established the Stockholm Internet Forum in Internet Freedom and for Global Development. The next forum will take place in May this year. To conclude, development, human rights, and security are closely correlated themes and intimately linked to internet freedom. As an example, let me refer to the adoption by consensus of the resolution in the Human Rights Council in July last year, affirming the importance of the internet to global development and the application of human rights online as well as offline. This is a landmark decision, demonstrating that maintaining free flow of information on the internet is a global call and not something which is pushed by a few members of the United Nations. We deeply regret, therefore, that the OSCE was unable to join in reaffirming the applicability of human rights online at the 2012 Dublin Ministerial Council. To this end, I'd like to take the opportunity to reiterate Sweden's support for the draft declaration on fundamental freedoms in the digital age. In our future endeavors, let us join in reaffirming and strengthening these globally agreed standards within the OSCE context. Thank you for your attention.
I thank you, Ambassador, for the statement, and call on the next speaker, the distinguished representative of Germany. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. At the outset, please allow me to warmly thank the OSCE representative on freedom of the media, Ms. Dunja Mijatovic, for having organized this very useful conference together with her able team in such an aptly manner. Germany fully subscribes to the statement made on behalf of the European Union. From our national perspective, I would like to add the following. Because of its global character, the Internet changes international cooperation fundamentally. The Internet offers unique chances to foster freedom and democratic values. Media freedom, which was at the focus of this conference, is especially important in this context. Moreover, the Internet is a significant pillar and driver of global wealth. To fully benefit from the advantages of the web, however, an intensive international exchange is needed to address its challenges as well. No single country can manage the ever-intensifying interlinkage of massive data streams. Likewise, no country alone can ensure the availability and integrity of our information technology. And only jointly we can make sure that authoritarian regimes won't abuse the Internet as a tool for repression. Therefore, we need to engage in an international dialogue on questions of Internet governance, to which this conference, initiated by the OSCE representative on freedom of the media, has made an important contribution. This dialogue should not only focus on technical and legal questions, but should also put emphasis on the values that guide us. From Germany's perspective, there are three basic principles which guide our German policies in the fields of Internet governance and cyber foreign policy. Freedom is our highest priority in Internet matters. Respect for the freedoms of expression and of speech, the right for free access to information, as well as for the freedom of the individual and the media, must be guaranteed. We must, however, always bear in mind that the protection of human and citizens' rights is a task which constantly requests our renewed attention. Secondly, freedom comes along with responsibility. Self-regulation is an important principle of Internet governance. Individuals, companies, and governments must act responsibly when they make use of the freedoms of the Internet. Regulation should be applied where democratic values or the rule of law are endangered. We need to strengthen cooperation on the protection of intellectual property and on combating crime while harnessing the creative potential power of the Internet. A free, open, and secure Internet is an indispensable prerequisite for information and communication technology, the use of which is important for economic and social development. Germany gives high priority to the principle of transparency and sharing knowledge and information as the basis of any modern society. The Internet provides us with new opportunities for global access to education, the exchange of opinions and experience, and for economic development and success. It nourishes the growth of a global public community and contributes to better mutual understanding, especially at the level of civil societies. Together with its partners in the European Union, Germany strives for the goal to further strengthen the principle of freedom, transparency, and the protection of the rights of the individual online. In this context, we consider the OSCE to be an important forum which can set an example for the necessary global cooperation in this field. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, sir, for the statement. I now invite the next speaker, the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation. The floor is yours, sir.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Прежде всего, хотелось бы присоединиться к благодарностям в адрес организаторов такого содержательного и интересного мероприятия «Интернет-2013». 2013 год не только год со дня рождения 200-летия Рихарда Вагнера и Джузеппе Верди, о чем гласят плакаты на Венской опере недалеко отсюда, но и 30 лет с момента появления на свет протокола TCP/IP, который, собственно говоря, сейчас у нас называется иным словом, словом «интернет», виновника нашего сегодняшнего мероприятия. Всего 30 лет прошло с того момента, но мы уже, очевидно, не можем представить нашу жизнь без интернета. И поэтому закономерно, что вопросы его функционирования, правоотношений, которые возникают в сети, сейчас уже интересны не только узкопрофильным специалистам, но и широкому кругу специалистов и людей, которых интересует эта тематика. Это подтверждает факт проведения этого мероприятия и состав его участников. Такие встречи в первую очередь помогают нам выяснить, с какими трудностями мы сталкиваемся по мере развития интернета, какие вызовы нам следует преодолеть, чтобы правила поведения людей в интернете были понятны и выполнялись каждым участникам правоотношений. В реальной жизни люди годами, столетиями вырабатывали правила, кодексы поведения, условия, по которым мы можем существовать и жить, восстанавливали законы. Конечно, мы всегда опираемся на позицию, что интернет не является какой-то особой сферой регулирования. Это не какая-то отдельная от реальной жизни вещь, это лишь ее составляющая, хоть и виртуальная. Однако очевидно, что эта виртуальная часть с каждым годом начинает играть в нашей жизни все большую и большую роль. В то же время эффективность старых законов реального времени, в интернет-пространстве зачастую невысоки. Этому есть ряд причин, и они нередко находятся на противоположных чашах весов. Например, с одной стороны, мы понимаем, что интернет носит трансграничный характер, мы все это осознаем, и что различия национальных законодательств, очевидно, не идут на пользу его регулированию. С другой стороны, мы все признаем право и обязанность государств осуществлять суверенитет на своей территории и в отношении своих граждан. Суть проблемы, обсуждавшейся на нескольких секциях в этой конференции, сводится к тому, что на сегодняшний день изменились реалии, и прежние термины многими понимаются иначе. Понимаем, что для конструктивной, любой конструктивной дискуссии нам вначале следует определиться с предметом обсуждения и, соответственно, договориться о терминологии. Появление так называемых новых медиа размыло ранее общепринятое понятие средств массовой информации. Теперь мы чаще говорим о средствах коммуникации, что все же, очевидно, не одно и то же. Отдельного обсуждения заслуживает тема так называемых гражданских блогеров, гражданских журналистов. Пожалуй, никто не будет спорить с тем, что высказывающий частную позицию в своем блоге человек не может называться журналистом. Гражданская журналистика становится прекрасным подспорьем для профессиональной журналистики, когда в первую очередь необходимо получить оперативную информацию с места событий, не каждый журналист может там быть, или необходим взгляд со стороны на проблему. Однако основная проблема – вопрос достоверности информации и, как следствие, доверия к ней. Большинству людей нужна уверенность в источнике информации, а эту уверенность может дать только профессиональная журналистика. Этот тезис мы неоднократно слышали и на экспертных сессиях, которые проходили в эти дни. Как следствие, мы все чаще начинаем сталкиваться с последствиями некорректного обращения с недостоверной информацией. Это, конечно, в первую очередь касается детей и подростков. В этих условиях мы обязаны подготовить подрастающее поколение к жизни в окружении постоянного потока, усиливающегося с каждым годом информационной продукции посредством межправительственных, надправительственных программ медиаобразования и медиаграмотности. Нас также очень обнадежил тот факт, что на вопрос в зал одного из модераторов дискуссии под названием «Интеллектуальная собственность в цифровую эпоху», кто считает, что нынешнее законодательство в области авторских прав отвечает реалиям времени и не требует пересмотра, поднялась одна одинокая рука. Это говорит о том, что мы двигаемся в правильном направлении. Напомню, что бывший президент и нынешний премьер-министр России Дмитрий Медведев еще в 2011 году в своем послании странам G20 говорил о необходимости пересматривать существующую систему охраны авторских прав в сторону большей открытости и доступности произведений онлайн, в том числе в первую очередь в культурных, образовательных и научных целях. В заключение хотелось бы еще раз поблагодарить организаторов конференции за возможность обмена мнениями по широкому кругу вопросов и добавить: любое регулирование интернета предполагает комплексный подход, или, как сейчас модно говорить, multi-stakeholderism. Односторонние попытки устанавливать правила в сети вызывают очевидно негативную реакцию. Яркий пример недавней реакции интернет-сообщества на проекты соглашений ACTA и PIPA, ну, аналогичные. Как показала дискуссия последних дней и здравый смысл, интернет – это, очевидно, не разновидность средств массовой информации, масс-медиа. Это пространство, где могут существовать и традиционные средства массовой информации, электронные версии печатных СМИ, телевидения, радио, и новые медиа, собственно. В связи с этим Россия выражает пожелание ОБСЕ определить свою нишу в совместных глобальных усилиях по обеспечению свободы слова в интернете. В этих целях Российская Федерация поддерживает прозвучавшую в ходе конференции идею представителей гражданского общества провести ревизию рамок действия мандата представителей ОБСЕ по вопросам свободы средств массовой информации. Предлагаем украинскому председательству организовать работу в соответствующем комитете Постоянного совета. Благодарю за внимание. Спасибо.
Thank you for your statement. And now I pass the floor to the distinguished representative of Armenia. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We thank Ms. Dunya Mijatovic, OSCE representative on freedom of media, for organizing conference on internet, which apparently attracted great interests among all stakeholders. We will carefully study various opinions expressed throughout deliberations, paying particular interest to good practices of RTM. The main good practice that Armenia can invoke in this realm is a free and unrestricted internet. We do understand that this is only one of good practices, and we are eager to study all other good practices which are consistent with the OSCE commitments and values. In our view, access to internet is essential to exercise human rights and it cannot be denied to individuals or groups of population in the entire OSCE region. Internet is destined to become daily reality almost for everyone in the OSCE region. In the last 2 years, Armenia witnessed enormous increase in internet users, and currently 60% of the Armenian population is connected to internet. Different social networks have more than 1 million users in Armenia, which is 1/3 of the population. That being said, let me stress that internet remains a medium of communication, and it can be effectively utilized in an environment where human rights are upheld, particularly the right to freedom of expression. Armenia has recently registered strong progress in promoting and protecting freedom of expression, also through libel decriminalization and creating predictable and transparent framework for defining administrative fees. The decisive input of the Armenian civil society was indispensable in this success. We also acknowledge the important role of the OSCE representative on freedom of media here, and we look forward to continuing our fruitful cooperation. I thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your statement. And I call on the next speaker, the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I align myself with the remarks made by the European Union, as well as those made by the Netherlands on behalf of the Freedom Online Coalition, of which we are an enthusiastic member. But I would also like to make some national remarks. I would first of all like to thank the representative on freedom of the media, Dunya Mijatovic, and her outstanding staff for organizing this conference. The protection and promotion of freedom of expression, including on the internet, is a human rights priority for my government. It is for that reason that we are one of the co-sponsors of this conference. We are very proud that we have, in a modest way, been able to contribute to an event that has provided such a valuable platform for the exchange of best practice, the sharing of ideas, a discussion of the opportunities and challenges provided by the internet and social media, and a conference that has attracted such diverse and multi-stakeholder participation. Many of the questions addressed during this conference have been a common feature of discussion at the OSCE in recent years. Questions such as, should freedom of expression and other fundamental freedoms and human rights apply online in the same way as offline? When we speak of freedom of expression in the online world, should we look beyond so-called traditional media outlets and include groups such as social bloggers and citizen journalists? Is the blocking of the internet acceptable as a means of responding to hate speech or speech offensive to others' values? Where are the limits to freedom of expression, and how does one tackle hate speech whilst ensuring that freedom of expression is defended? These and many other issues raised during this conference are of course difficult, and let us be frank, have sometimes been divisive as we seek to strengthen our common OSCE commitments in the field of freedom of expression. My government does not claim to have all of the answers, but our general approach to freedom of expression on the internet and in social media is rooted in the following principles. First, the promotion and protection of human rights is at the heart of the United Kingdom's foreign policy. Second, we believe that human rights should apply with equal force online as they do offline. The internet is simply a different medium from newspapers, magazines, and books. Third, we should guard against any attempts to use the internet as a means of political repression and should resist calls to censor content just because some may find it objectionable or offensive. Fourth, the internet is a powerful tool that is transforming our world and changing our lives. It has been an unprecedented engine for growth and social progress, including by offering people a different way of exercising their human rights. Fifth, the networked world has produced challenges and threats for all countries. Sixth, in addressing these challenges, governments should be proportionate and always err on the side of freedom. Seventh, our networked world belongs to no one person or group, but transcends the geography, politics, and the special interest of individual countries. Governments, civil society, and business should work together to discuss issues pertaining to the internet, including when addressing issues of internet governance. And finally, but particularly relevant in an OSCE context, an open but safe internet is key to supporting security and prosperity for all. The United Kingdom does not expect that all participating states will necessarily agree with all of these principles. But the very fact that we have had the discussions over the last few days speaks to a reality that some partners have at times seemed to question over recent months, namely that the internet plays a role in our everyday lives, including in the media, whether we like it or not. It is undeniably a means of expressing opinion as well as other rights and freedoms. It is also a means of economic development. Mr. Chairman, we are fortunate enough in the OSCE to have, in the guise of the Office of the Representative on Freedom of the Media, a professional and dedicated institution with the skills, experience and knowledge to help us adapt our freedom of expression commitments and practices to the realities of the 21st century. We should support, cooperate with and strengthen its ability to assist us all in achieving our common commitments. And to those who might question whether the RFOM's mandate extends to the online world, I say this, as someone who falls within the category of those who acknowledge their limitations when it comes to understanding and utilizing the full benefits of new technologies. Freedom of expression, whether it be through the so-called traditional media or online, should of course be addressed by the representative on freedom of the media and the OSCE. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you, Ambassador, for your statement. Dear colleagues, we have now exhausted the list of speakers for this session, and I want to thank all delegations that have taken the floor and presented their national positions on such an important and complex issue as internet freedom. As we are approaching the closure of this conference after intensive 1.5-day debate, I'm pleased to pass the floor to the representative on the freedom of the media, Ms. Dunja Mijatovic, for her closing remarks. Dunja, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you all for words of support, words of criticism. I'm really delighted to see so many delegations present and so many views in relation to the topic we discussed in the past 2 days. It is an honor and a pleasure for me and my team to be able to talk to all of you, to address these issues, but also it is wonderful for so many people that traveled from far and near to hear the views of 57 participating states in relation to the topic that my office is covering. As is the task of my office, we have focused on aspects of the internet which touch the world of media, and in its form of new aggregation, dissemination and consumption, which we all know is fundamental requirement for democracies. The session have resulted, all the sessions have resulted in a broad range of recommendations from experts, civil society, academia, and of course, participating states. We are still collecting your views, and we are still collecting your ideas. As it is usual for the OSCE, for such conferences, and they are really meant to help with implementation of media freedom commitments and to assist all of you to develop best solutions for honoring these commitments. Hence, we will carefully assess all these ideas that we collected and group them in a user-friendly way to the benefit of all of you. You can expect the final version of the conference recommendations to be uploaded and distributed in a few days. Let me recall briefly the broad range of topics this conference has touched upon. It has been the most comprehensive event on internet I have ever hosted. Just to give you a few highlights, we have touched upon the issues of copyright, hateful speech, freedom of speech for minorities in digital age, the protection of minors, how to tackle illegal content, self-regulation, rights and responsibilities of internet services and netizens, and even such seemingly marginal issues like editor-to-editor's problem and problematic language in news commentaries. The very fact that all OSCE institutions actively presented their views and involvement with human rights on the internet shows the abundance of opportunities this global infrastructure offers and therefore needs to be protected. It is interinstitutional and it is interdisciplinary. I would also like to use this opportunity to thank my dear colleagues Janez Lenarčič and Knut Volovec for coming and sharing the views of other two institutions in this related issue and topic. This conference, as I mentioned at the opening, is following up what began in Amsterdam in 2003, initiated by my predecessors, Freimut Dove and Miklos Harasti, and funded by Netherlands. And it was established basic principle, what actually was initiation of discussion of this topic by the OSCE. There were several issues that these recommendations touched upon, and they are still relevant nowadays. Internet literacy, and last but not least, the underlying fundamental principle that offline and online content are subject to the same protection under freedom of expression and freedom of the media standards. And this is something that we already heard by so many of you today. Despite the fact that internet is present in our everyday lives and in almost every household in the OSCE, this conference was only made possible by the generous contribution of 8 OSCE participating states. It is therefore more than justified to name them again. These are the governments of Austria, the Czech Republic, France, Ireland, the Netherlands, Norway, the United Kingdom, and the United States. But I would also like to thank all participating states for being actively engaged, for sending wonderful speakers, government officials, civil society representatives, academia, and all these people that gathered here in Vienna in order to see how we can move forward in a constructive way and using a dialogue as an issue that is bringing all of us closer. And I think the internet is also trying to bring us closer. We should just not be so afraid of it. Yesterday and today, we have again covered new ground by addressing new forms of media-like content and new media products online. Although we have not come and did not expect to find common definitions of forms of journalistic content and citizen journalism, we can deny that such production has a journalistic component which interacts and feeds into traditional media. We had possibility to listen to Paul Lewis from The Guardian, and he really demonstrated all of this when he had his presentation during the side event 2 days ago. When it comes to regulation, I would like to recall what Professor Dawn Nunziato said yesterday at the opening session, and I think we are going to quote her quite a lot on this. We need to operate with a scalpel and not with a sledgehammer. I think in so many issues here at the OSCE we can use this. This means that before regulating aspects of the internet, the question must be asked which is the least intrusive way to do it, and whether there are alternatives to regulation to accomplish the objective. Equally important is the question of whom we want to protect by regulating certain aspects. All under the paramount guiding rule that human rights must be our yardstick, and as was convincingly pointed out by our second excellent keynote speaker, Professor Yaroslav Skvartsov from Moscow State Institute of International Relations. It is also important to note that both presentations of 2 distinguished professors are already uploaded on our website. We can clearly say that internet is not per se media, but equally we must recognize that media without the internet in the year 2013 is simply unthinkable. Thank you to all moderators, to speakers, to all participants. We hope to be able to see many of you soon when we have different events that this organization is organizing. And with all due, I would like to slowly close and to thank PPIS, our Public Relations Office. It would be impossible to do it without their help. Conference services and Secretariat in general for helping us organize this event for you. It goes without saying that we need to thank our professional and hardworking interpreters, but I would also like to thank my staff. I'm really grateful that most of you already mentioned the importance of the team that is trying to, together with me, to do this job. As you know, it's a very small team, but team of very dedicated, energetic people that really made it possible to organize Internet 2013 conference. And of course, to the chair in office, to the chairmanship, for helping us and supporting us in this very important endeavor. Thank you so much.
Well, I think that the official closing is still pending, so on my part, I would also like to thank the representative, Ms. Dunja Mijatovic, and her team for this excellent platform of this conference for exchanging views on this important topic as Internet freedom. This conference, in our review, has fostered an open and inclusive dialogue on the challenges of Internet freedom involving different stakeholders like governments, private sector, civil society, and academia. The chairmanship welcomes focus on issues of media freedom, including on the Internet, within the framework of the OSCE. In our review, it is essential for the participating states to continue to engage with the representative and her team on issues relating to Internet freedom. We should continue to explore possible steps on how the Internet could be governed to remain open, free, safe, and inclusive. Once again, I thank the representative on freedom of the media, Ms. Mijatovic. I thank all participants of this conference for their contribution to the debate. For those of the participants who arrived to Vienna specifically for this conference, I wish a safe trip back home. Hereby, I declare the conference closed. Thank you.